got that cherry bomb.
Welcome to Breaking Beauty Podcast, Dimitra. So let's talk about how Indeed Labs got started 15 years ago. Like, what was the kernel? What's the origin story that a lot of people don't know?
Right. Yeah. First of all, wow. Like, how can we even wrap our heads around 15 years?
Yes.
I was a young mom. I had a need. And my youngest daughter was about, I think she was 2-ish when we started or maybe just over a year old when we started conceptualizing the idea of this brand. I had a need. I had gone to a dermatologist and I had some hyperpigmentation from my pregnancy. I couldn't get rid of it. My dermatologist prescribed hydroquinone. I looked it up and I was too afraid to use it. And then it was so serendipitous because at that time I met this gentleman by the name of Brandon Truaxe. I was already consulting, so I had already established my career. My background is in finance, as some of you might know, and then I was in luxury goods, and I had gone off and I went back to school and did an HR specialist, so I was in full swing, my own business consulting, helping to build small to medium-sized companies. And I met Brandon Truaxe, who said that he had been working for a skincare brand. He was a computer guy, and we had this conversation. He said, I want to start a skincare brand because do you know what's going on behind the scenes? And I said, no, I don't. But actually what I know is that I have a need.
Right.
So, Brandon and I kept in touch, and I kept saying, can you make something for this? Because I've gone to the drugstore and I can't find something to help treat this. And nobody seems to know what ingredients are in products. Except for my doctor, my dermatologist, but I don't want to use what he has prescribed. It sounds scary to me. Yeah. And so I think it was through those conversations that we decided to launch a skincare brand to have products made affordable and accessible to consumers everywhere, and to really dive into the science of the products and the ingredients that go into them. But I really believe that it was through those conversations. I never expected to be in the skincare business. It was this person that was so excited about this opportunity, and me selfishly going, okay, well, that sounds great because I'm a consumer.
Yeah.
And I had an expertise to help build strong teams. So what I did was behind the scenes. We built the lab, we hired our teams, and Brandon was the front end marketing genius.
Yeah, amazing. I do remember, and everybody can go back and listen to that episode back in our archives, because we were one of very few, if not almost the only podcast that had Brandon on the show back in the day. How do you reflect on that now that he has passed, his untimely passing? Like, how do you reflect on that now? What do people maybe not know as an outsider?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. It took me a really long time to process, to reconcile in my mind. Obviously his untimely passing was it. For somebody like myself, I met him when he was 29 years old, put a lot of faith in him. It was shocking, and it was too soon for a marketing mind, a genius like that. Hard to reconcile, because just like a lot of people in Brandon's path, he left us hurt. Me and our business partners, and especially me. So it took me a long time, and I say especially me because I took on this burden I felt at the time and responsibility that I was supposed to take on with a partner. I wasn't supposed to be in front of the brand.
Right.
But it was a huge investment. At the time, I had raised capital through my networks to help our expansion across the United States. I've actually never spoken candidly about this, and I think it's time, because it was really, really hard for me to not be upset at somebody, especially in their very untimely passing.
Yes. Right.
And then also in my mind to give myself the confirmation that I was meant to be here. And it took me a couple of years. It took me a couple of years to get my footing, to go through pain, to also go through like the skepticism. And you didn't start this brand, Brandon did. To stand here and say, yeah, that was really early on. I took on a challenge that most people would have run away from.
Yeah.
I took it on head on. I learned everything that I needed to learn in the industry. I worked tirelessly to the point where I even sacrificed being a mom sometimes, on the road constantly. And it took me a while to just sit there in my own accomplishments and the accomplishments of Indeed Labs and say, you know, today, 61 awards later, the brand may have started by Brandon's idea, and our foundation and the ethos of the brand still exists to this day, why we started and why we launched in the industry. But to be able to identify and embrace the fact that if it wasn't for Brandon, I don't know what my life would have looked like today.
Right.
He put me on this course.
Yeah.
And I value and appreciate.
Yeah.
I miss sometimes, you know, that opportunity to go, you know, like, Brandon, what do you think? Like,
Right.
for a long time, I felt like I could feel his presence.
Yeah.
I feel like he's rooting for Indeed Labs
Yeah.
because this was his baby.
Right.
This was what put him on the map.
Yeah.
And you guys know the industry is competitive, and I did things slowly, and I was behind the scenes for a long time. I literally just opened up a public account 6 months ago. So what does that tell you? You know, I didn't want to be in front of the brand for a
Right.
long time. He put me on this course. I learned a lot in terms of, you know, disruption, because that was
Yes.
Brandon.
Yeah.
I also learned a lot about credibility, about honesty. There were other aspects and other things that weren't there, which is why we severed ties at the beginning. That's all
Yeah.
I can say.
Yeah.
It's a really long one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm good. I'm good
Yeah.
at knowing that I honor what he brought in my world
Yes.
and take all that goodness from it
And forward.
and forward.
I commend you for even talking about it, because we've interviewed a lot of brand founders, and listen, business is messy sometimes. In the last year, I can tell you how many brand people started a brand together and then they're no longer working together anymore. It happens all the time, but it's just maybe not so public. And I also commend you for, you know, saying that you weren't a cosmetic chemist, but you never claimed to be either. But people came for you and you're like, what do you know about X, Y, Z? It was all brand. And so I always thought that was like it was unfair because you never said you were, right? But
Yeah, and also the strengths that I brought to the
Yeah.
table and what our leadership team brought to
Right.
the table that no one ever speaks of, right? It was
Yeah.
who funded Brandon, who
Right.
built the lab with
Right.
Brandon, who hired all those people, who has a background in finance, which I did, who understood
Right.
branding and marketing. So we together, I think we started this, not I think, I know, we started down this journey, and it took me a while to embrace, this is mine.
yes.
Yeah.
It was so many products came after
Yeah.
Brandon, but I do have to honor his memory in the sense that not only did he change my world, but he changed all of our worlds in the skin
Yes.
and young consumers.
Yeah.
Yes,
Consumerism in
absolutely.
general.
Total disruptor.
Absolutely.
Total, absolute disruptor.
Major milestone in the beauty industry, and we were talking about this off the mic, that we've been around for so long and seen it all evolve. So he was definitely pivotal in that. But we also know that we've seen so many brands where the founder leaves and everything just starts to fall apart, and that didn't happen with Indeed Labs. It's 15 years later, and there's an evolution which we're going to get into in today's episode. So. But I think it's great that perspective allows us to come to a place where we can just see things better in hindsight and be able to acknowledge, just see it for what it was. So I appreciate that.
Yeah. So, you know, obviously with Indeed Labs, it was putting the hero ingredient front and center. That really was the genius. Never been done before. And, you know, people might have heard retinol was good for the skin, but they certainly weren't shopping for it or seeking it out necessarily, maybe from their derm, but not on a skincare label. So maybe walk us through that whole idea and what the process was for doing that with all the formulas at the beginning.
Really, really early on, I don't think the market was ready for ingredient-led skincare. I will say, because I still recall numerous conversations where I would say to people, you got to try this product. It's hyaluronic acid. It's pure form of red marine algae, hyaluronic. And they'd say, oh, acid. No, I can't use that. It's going to burn my face.
Right.
And look at how far we've come.
Yes.
Right. Now
Yes.
we've got the Riedel shot that stings and hurts, you know. So, so we launched with NanoBlur, which has light reflecting properties in it. It's
Yeah.
like an optical illusion. There's no treatment in that product. And that's because we knew that we needed to break into an industry that was going to be hard to come into, cement ourselves with credibility. And that credibility was our proposition, our value proposition was that we have skincare that's going to work.
Right.
So we needed to show consumers in that instant, it's going to work.
Yeah.
So it was very
Yeah.
strategic that we launched with NanoBlur. And in fact, our chief scientific officer who formulated NanoBlur in our lab, he still works with the company today.
Wow.
So deep rooted in science. It's not accidental that we've been able to lead trends, because I watch the trends a lot. And then I am, like I said, I was a consumer at the time. I still am. But I was a consumer that had a need. Today, I can mix anything I would need for myself in the lab.
Yeah. I remember when Indeed Labs came on the scene and with NanoBlur, and it was very, at the time, the marketing was at bus stops and, subways where you'd see this poster and it was the woman with the half face.
Right.
And
It was
one
almost
side
like
was
clinical, like somebody
Yeah.
released before and afters from a derm and put
Yeah.
them on a bus shelter.
But
right?
the before and after
Yeah.
was dramatic, and the claim was real science, real claims, real people, real results. So it wasn't airbrushed, right?
No.
Those results, and it felt like a cosmetic skincare hybrid, and it really felt quite miraculous that you could, even if it was a cosmetic product, that you could get this smoothing effect. And so, yeah.
And it was revolutionary coming from the magazine world, where like all of our big advertisers were Estee Lauder and Lancome.
Yeah,
It
airbrush.
airbrushed within an inch of its life.
Yes.
And that was the ideal.
Yeah.
Right.
It was before Instagram, right?
Exactly. So how did the chemist stumble upon this innovation, or what can you tell us without giving away the secret sauce?
So he has a PhD in this type of technology, and he really understood it really well. And at the time, high definition
Yes.
television was starting to really, it had just kind of exploded. Everyone, all of a sudden now you're watching television and you could see everything in large
Yes.
pores, shine. And we were looking, I don't remember who it was that we were having these discussions in terms of what product was going to launch first, but we thought about it, and we knew that technology would take off because, especially behind a camera,
Yes.
the instant results were undeniable. And in fact, they still are today. Like, we just had another video go viral again the other day from another big name influencer in our industry going, look at this.
I think
Right.
I just saw it before
Yeah.
came here. Was it Glamzilla?
Glamzilla.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And people were like, girl, you got me running to CVS.
Yeah, exactly. So I can't, like, people have asked me about virality and moments, and I've said to them, like, we've gone viral a number of times with a number of products, but with NanoBlur over
Yeah.
and over and over
Yeah.
again.
Yeah.
So the technology's never been duplicated. I can't give a lot of information regarding the technology, but what I can say is we created a category. So
Yeah.
we created the blurring category.
Yeah.
We definitely were the first brand that talked about filters before
Yeah.
filters existed. So now I say, it gives you kind of like that Paris filter in real
Yes.
life.
Yeah.
But who would have known 15 years
Yeah.
ago? We weren't even really using definitely not social media for
Yeah.
skincare.
Yes.
I mean, we took a regular camera and
Yeah.
took regular people and took photos of them, but it seemed like it was so highly curated in a dermatologist's office. And one of the publications told us that the ad that we ran was not pretty enough
Yes. I believe it.
at that time.
Wow.
And
Okay.
wow, right?
Yeah.
The model
100%.
wasn't attractive enough, so they wouldn't run the ad for us
That's
to
shocking.
not call them out. But yeah,
Oh,
I
I'm
wonder
not
if
shocked
it was
by
the
that at
magazine I
all.
was at, but it
Yeah.
wouldn't have been my department.
it wasn't
everyone.
Canadian. It
Oh,
was in the
okay.
UK. It was British.
okay,
yeah.
okay.
But nonetheless, I mean,
You're not the sales team.
No, fast forward,
Yeah.
I met with them years later, and I said, "Hey guys, do you remember what you said like
Yeah.
years ago?
Wow.
That's
Yeah.
that the world has changed. Thankfully, the world
Yes.
has changed a lot.
That's
The
right.
beauty standards that we had back then, we were very instrumental
Yeah.
for saying, that's not going to be us.
Yeah. And you did mention it's kind of has a life of its own, where it will, the people, if it's one of those things, if you know, but then
Yeah.
every so often it will get rediscovered on TikTok, or you had a major milestone with Euphoria. So tell us about that and how
Yeah.
that sort of impacted NanoBlur.
Yeah,
and a new
so
audience.
that was coming off the end of COVID, so people
Yeah.
were still not gathering together. We had created this studio that we're in here
Yes.
here filming today, and we were going to have a party. We didn't know what to do, and then Donnie Davy, who is the makeup artist on the set of Euphoria that season had done exceptionally well.
Yeah.
It was those makeup looks. She was interviewed. I think Kirby Johnson interviewed her, And they said, like, we had no idea. I had no idea that she was using our product, but I wasn't surprised because we do have a lot of celebrities, their makeup artists, they ask for our product all the time. But she was interviewed and they said, what's your secret? And she pulled out Nano Blur. So then, and that was right when TikTok had taken off. And somebody used it on TikTok and said, well, this is, this cream is magic. They used the word buhidia, and it just went crazy. So that was, and then we launched in here for the season finale of Euphoria. And that was a great event for us.
So great. We had Donnie on our show a while back. We'll link to that episode, guys, in our show notes and on our website. But I remember her talking about the Nano Blur, and there were certain characters who the director didn't want any makeup on them at all. And so like no foundation, no products like that. And so that's why she used the Nano Blur to give that blurring effect without having any look of makeup. So that was really fascinating. What about another product of yours that's gone viral a few times over, the Nano Bronze Bronzing Drops? Let's talk about that one. This is like a whole category now. I feel like so many brands have come out with this type of product. What makes the Nano Bronze so special that people keep coming back to it?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I had my own specific need. I have a story around that product, which is quite funny.
Do tell.
So I was doing press. I was in the UK. It was early spring. I was wearing a skirt. I wanted some color on my legs. I ran into Selfridges and they sold me a self tanner that was a liquid that was clear, like water. And I don't know why I got excited about it at the time. In hindsight, no, that's not a good thing. But I sprayed all over my legs, didn't apply it properly, and went off to my meeting. It processed. And then I looked down and I had streaks running down my legs.
There.
And so it was a long time ago. This was before people were even thinking bronzers. And so I ran into, I don't remember, drugstores or wherever I went to look for a bronzer to cover it up. And I couldn't find a bronzer that had enough pigment in it and not a lot of mica, like sparkle.
Yes.
Because I didn't want to look like I was wearing makeup on my legs.
Yeah.
And I couldn't find anything. So I was so frustrated. I called my team and I said, hey guys, guess what? We're going to make a bronzer. But because we're not a one ingredient brand, we are a formula based brand, and most of our products have multiple benefits. I wanted to be the first brand that had a bronzer with actives that are good, high levels and good enough to use every day as a daily moisturizer as well. So we were one of the first brands that created this daily moisturizer with bronzing in it.
Yeah.
And I think that's what made it so special. But also when I was creating it, and again, this is years ago, I wanted to make sure that we were able to get a wide range of skin tones.
Yes.
So it was pretty pigmented without being orangey.
Yeah.
So you were able to dilute it down if you're more fair, or use it on its own if you are a darker tone. So I think that that's why it did so well. And at its price point.
Yeah, I was just, you took the words out of my mouth. I was just about to say, we haven't even talked about the price point of Indeed Labs. So I believe, how much are the Nano Bronze drops?
$24.99
In Canada?
Yeah.
And how much in the US?
I believe they're $24.99
Yeah,
as
so
well.
less than $30.
Yeah.
And there's a very infamous product out there that costs at least double, if not triple the price. And it just makes sense. And one thing that I really love about the Nano Bronzing Drops is, to your point, there's no sparkle in it. And I actually saw a makeup artist yesterday on Instagram say she uses Nano Bronze pretty much exclusively on her male grooming clients before camera work. Because it gives that glow, but doesn't look like they're wearing makeup. And to your point, it's skincare first versus color.
So it's
What
got
are
an
the actives?
antioxidant.
Yeah.
It's got an antioxidant. It's got hyaluronic acid. It's got a pea extract in there, and so it can actually give you sort of that self tan over a period of time if you use it consistently. But for the most part, it's very hydrating, very moisturizing, and also then it has that daily antioxidant. So that's what you really need during the day. But it's interesting because what I was going to say about that is men's grooming. It's so funny because so many men ask me, do you make products for men? But we have so many makeup artists that use exclusively our products on their men clients. Like recently we were tagged with Patrick Mahomes, and during the film festival here in Toronto, it was all the male actors that were using our Nano Blur and Nano Bronze. So we have
that makes sense. Between the two of them, it really is that perfect, like, genderless, no makeup kind of idea. Now, I think on that note, though, we need to move on to another kind of sister brand, I guess you launched last year, which maybe people don't know of as much. It's called Fin, but it's spelled PH-IN. So tell us about that, because one of the things that popped out to me right away is you really see that pH. It's a small p, capital H. So we understand that it has something to do with pH, and it treats acne. So I just have never seen that at the forefront so much, where pH seems to be the kind of star ingredient, I guess, and even
Selling
though it's
point
not an
almost.
ingredient, it's the
Yeah.
but it's the hero kind of idea. So tell us about that.
Yeah, definitely. So being a skincare brand, a skincare brand owner, obviously one of the biggest concerns that consumers have is acne, treating acne. I had my own personal story and journey with acne. When I was younger, I used a 3-step system. I went to my dermatologist. I felt, and I was younger back then. We didn't know anything about skincare back then. I felt like my face was lighter than the rest of my body. I thought I was imagining it. It was actually bleaching my skin, benzoyl peroxide.
Yeah.
I went to my dermatologist and he tried to sell me on a cleanser. And I said, well, I'm using this system. He said, how long have you been using for? I said, 18 months. He scared the living daylights out. He said, you should not be using this for extended periods of time. And of course, as a consumer and somebody who suffered with acne, I was too afraid to come off of it. So fast forward, I started to learn about our skin's microbiome, how our skin functions and how it works. And so I tasked our scientists to create, in theory, acne is triggered by a bunch of different things, could be hormones, stress, genetics, but how it's formed is an overproduction of sebum. The acne strain of bacteria called C. acnes feeds off that excess sebum. It multiplies, and then the excess bacteria, C. acnes, as well as the sebum gets stuck in the hair follicle. That's how acne is formed. In theory, then, if we actually control our skin's microbiome, which is made up of funguses, virus, and bacteria, and we keep that bacteria intact without it being overgrown, we should be able, your skin should be able to do what it's supposed to do itself, to purge naturally and heal itself. So we started to look at that. And so what we realized is if you keep your skin in its optimal pH zone at all times, for at a 4.5 to 5.7 pH zone, then it'll treat itself. And so we started to create products to keep your skin pH balanced and protect your skin's microbiome. And we sent it through clinicals, and we got back the clinical results. And we saw that the clinical results were just as strong as any other acne treatment in the market, except that this brand doesn't kill all bacteria, which is absolutely essential to your overall health.
Right.
And the more we learned about our microbiome, the more we learned that our skin, our brain, and our gut are connected.
Right.
And so I got super excited. We put it through 3 rounds of clinicals, as well as the 3rd round under the advice of a board-certified dermatologist, Dr. Noel Solish, with our scientists, and the results were unparalleled. And then we
I
sent it
remember the
out for
before and
microbiome
afters.
certification.
Yeah.
And so for me, in terms of excitement, like people ask
Right.
me, what products are you most excited about? What opportunity can you give consumers? For me, Fin is the best results we've ever gotten with something that is not bad.
Wow, that's really saying a lot, because it is a lot of education and maybe a bit of a hard sell to get people to change their mindset, where it's a gentle approach to acne. You don't actually have to obliterate it for it to be gone. It's a low and slow in a way, which some people might not understand, or like, it's just so different than the paradigm that we've been living in for so long.
Except that it does the same exact thing. It's just it's sustainable.
Yeah.
So if you see other acne, if you read the back labels of acne treatments, they'll say after a month you should see or speak to your dermatologist.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be using them for extended periods of time. And we also know that breaking down our skin's barrier can result
Yeah.
in other issues
Totally.
longer term. It can be linked to eczema, it can be linked
Yeah,
to rosacea,
absolutely.
and all these other skin problems that people have. But the clinicals on the acne side are so strong. Over 92% said that they saw visible reduction in acne, which is the same clinicals
Yeah.
as acne treatments without any irritation.
And for everyone listening, it's 3 products, right? Can you just explain?
Yeah,
what it
there's
is?
a cleanser. It's a
system,
pH
kinda.
balancing, gentle pH
Right.
balancing cleanser. So it cleanses without stripping. And then the second step, which is your moisture treatment. And that's the other thing. Because it's not doing anything harsh, it doesn't feel, you're not feeling any stinging.
No
You're not
tingling.
feeling any
Yeah.
irritation. You're not getting any dryness. So it's a moisturizer, but that's where the magic happens. That's where you're targeting the excess bacteria, the C. acnes. And then, of course, we have our mask, which helps with another byproduct of acne is scarring, and the scarring is actually really hard to treat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's what our third step is for.
Okay, amazing.
Okay.
And what about Indeed Labs? Anything new
Yeah.
coming down the pike that we should be excited about for 2025?
Yes, absolutely. So we are launching 4 new products. 3 of them are targeting a very specific consumer.
Okay.
And super excited. Can't give a lot of information about it just yet, but they will be launching early February, so very timely.
Okay.
Definitely, we've seen a movement in this industry, bringing in younger consumers. I am a huge advocate of definitely creating healthy habits at a young age. I don't know if you guys know this. Well, you know this. We talked about my daughter earlier, but I have 3 daughters.
Yeah.
And I had a really hard time, even as a mom who has a skincare brand and knows
Yeah.
so much about our skin and science of products, convincing them to have healthy habits. So in that vein, I'm excited that younger consumers are paying attention and self-love is important to them. I don't think we want to discourage them. I think we want to encourage it, and we want to encourage it in a way that's safe.
Okay. Ooh.
Absolutely. Well, it sounds like this is going to be perfectly in timing for the tweens at Sephora that we saw headlining 2024 really, and offering better options that are more appropriate for their skin type, I'm guessing, is what it's all about. Because if they just reach for anything that's a bright and shiny color, they might end up scorching their acid mantle.
Yeah.
So
And definitely a lot of thought went behind what is their very specific needs, their skin needs, but also what do moms need?
Yeah.
And so moms need convenience, moms need wallet friendly, and moms need to be able to be reassured that whatever their children are doing is safe for them and not potentially harmful.
Right.
Yes.
And so that's where the challenge becomes, because we have a responsibility to our consumers to do a lot of the work for them and take the guesswork out of it for
Right,
them.
right.
They're busy. People
Right.
are busy. So
Yeah.
I'm really excited about this.
Yeah, I'm excited too. Listen, I've got one teen and one tween, so I'll be happy
You'll
to
have to be
test it
first,
in my
yeah.
household. And I remember being there with my daughter where, just like you said, I have a closet full of skincare, and I really had to question, what can I use on 10-year-old skin
course.
that is going to be appropriate? So
Right. They don't need a hell of a lot or
Yeah.
a heck of a lot.
Exactly.
Sorry. But what they need is definitely proper cleansing and a little bit of, and also it's just that our industry is very tactile. It's that feeling that you're giving yourself self-love, just that feeling that you're giving.
Yeah.
So that's really
to
important
develop
for
the
our
habit.
consumers. So,
Yeah, for
exactly.
sure. It's like the Mickey Mouse toothbrush in a way. It's like, let's just give them a little enticement.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Dimitra, looking back, like we said, 2025 is a big year for Indeed Labs. 15 years on the scene, which is amazing. What advice would you have for other skincare startups right now? Because there just are so many. There's so many more than when you all started in 2010. So what's the number one thing you think that a brand needs to win today? I mean, is it getting an Instagram account finally after 15 years?
Not necessarily. It's
Yeah,
it's not
interesting.
necessarily but the numbers, really. So here's my advice. If you don't have a competitive advantage, don't compete. Okay, that's not just personally my advice. That's been advice that's been out there for a long time, but it is so true in our industry that if you don't bring a product to market if it already exists out there. And that's frustrating right now because there's a lot of copycat brands that are coming out. we're seeing that, I don't know what the name of that company is that's knocking off brands. Really crazy packaging, naming. You know, I've been doing this for a long time, so I don't know how they're able to do that.
Yeah.
Right. But yeah. So if you don't, I think if you don't have something different, it's going to be very difficult. You can't, we've seen it. You can't just start off with a great following on social.
Yeah.
It doesn't always work. You can't start off that you have a really anchored celebrity status. It doesn't always work. You have to have a good product. You have to have a point of difference. You have to have a consumer that has that need for your products. And if you don't, then it's probably not a good idea, because it's not going to be successful.
Yeah. The straight talk. Appreciate that. And our final question for you, you mentioned you're a mom of 3 daughters. Daughter mom, what's the best beauty advice that you've shared with them?
Definitely prevention. I would say that and we hear so much about prevention these days. Skincare is prevention.
Yeah.
Skincare products are prevention. I think that once you see something, it's too late. In my early career, somebody said to me, what you do in your 20s, you will see in your 30s and every 10 years. I think that that's the advice I've always given my children. And that, prevention is key. I think if you don't really have a proper routine that you stick to, and also listen to your skin, then you're going to see what you're doing wrong 10 years from now, and it's going to be too late.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time today.
You know what?
The time flew by.
It flew by. This is well overdue. I have like a million questions for you guys.
Yeah, go ahead. Mics are rolling if you want.
B-side.
Yeah, exactly.
When you guys made the transition onto this side of the world, you must have been nervous at the time, right?
Yeah, I mean, I just don't think we thought it would be like full time.
Yeah.
Me anyway.
Yeah, no, I think we thought it would be a gig.
Yes.
Like part of the freelance,
Juggle.
yeah, toolkit.
I have to ask, because you guys have behind the scenes with everybody in this industry. What's the most shocking thing that, consumers don't know?
Ooh. I think it's been interesting to me to see how certain brand founders, how deep they roll. I mean, in terms of an entourage, it's like the new celebrity in certain cases. And there are big influencers that have big brands, and they are like their teams treat them like an A-lister, which was pretty shocking to me, I would have to say. No names will be named.
I'm going to aspire to that.
Yeah.
You guys see me throwing chairs over my head, picking the colors for the, people ask me and I go, I do everything from A to Z around. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, of course, I have an unbelievable team. You guys have met them.
Yeah.
They're great.
But you were literally chasing someone down on the street
Yes.
before we came in here today to get
and
what
telling
you
them
needed
that
to
men
do.
have
Yeah.
skin too.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I agree
yeah.
with that. And I think that some founders we've spoken to or not spoken to, I think what's interesting is sometimes if there's been we used to always say that we would talk to founders about their foils and fist pump moments. So knowing that there's going to be ups and downs in the process of being an entrepreneur, because we really have interviewed a lot of founders in the beauty business, and the founders who just don't want to talk about the low points. That's been interesting, I think. There have been some founders where prior to getting on the mic, they've said, I don't want to talk about this or that. And we've said, well, then we can't move forward because,
It's part of the story.
It's part of the story. And in the spirit of transparency, it's important. So yeah, that's another kind of behind the scenes, I would say that, it was kind of surprising to us, just because we're having real conversations is what podcasts are all about.
Yeah. Well, I think, I often say one day I'll have to write a book or something. I've just seen so much in this business.
Absolutely.
But yeah, as I said earlier, I wasn't comfortable sharing it. It wasn't because that story didn't exist. It wasn't because there's anything to hide.
Yeah.
It was because I hadn't at the time reconciled, like I said,
Yes.
in my mind, what it meant to me.
Correct, yeah.
You
Yeah.
go through so many different emotions, like
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
fear to anger to, sadness. I remember being really sad when I got the news
Yeah.
of Brandon's passing.
Yeah.
And yet I used to run into him across the street at the coffee shop the odd time, and he was doing his thing and I was doing my thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, right?
Yeah.
So it was, but even just trying to reconcile, like, why did this all happen? What does it
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
Anyway, but
Absolutely.
I can see that. I can see that there's a
Yeah.
lot of smoke and mirrors.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm brutally honest.
Yes.
To the point where I have to remind myself not everybody likes the honest truth.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
I just leave them in their own little worlds. They don't need to know all this stuff,
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's so
it's-
funny. I'm
Well, I'll
the
be very
same.
interested to see, and it's on IMDb, so I'll say it when this documentary about Brandon comes out.
Yeah.
I think there's a few of them, so I'm
Yes.
curious to see what's been shared, who's sharing,
Yeah.
and
Yes.
I think he is just an enigmatic figure
Yeah.
that left such a lasting impression, and I think a lot of people have been probably processing and
Yes.
thinking.
Yes.
And I'll be curious to
Were
see it all
you-
come
were
to
you
light.
approached?
Yes. Yeah.
Are you part of? Are you?
I am
taking
part of one of them.
Okay.
And again, I didn't think that it was necessary.
Yeah.
I didn't think that I played that big a role in his world.
Right.
To be honest, but when I realized that that was a very important missing piece of the story that nobody
Right.
had.
Yes.
Okay.
Nobody knew where he came from.
Right.
See, I
Nobody
see.
knew, like at some point he kind of like started Deciem and then The Ordinary.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and there was, a lot of talk
Yeah.
about what happened in that world, but
Right.
nothing in my world.
Yeah.
And so we had been under strict lock. And obviously my board said like, no, I wouldn't talk about that
Yeah.
stuff if I were you. And I was like, well, it's happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why
exactly.
not? So
Yeah.
They could also listen to our podcast, which is still in our archives. He
Yes,
does talk about
when
it.
we talked, he
Right.
talked
Yeah.
about very candidly, and I mean, I think everything with Brandon was probably a bit of a grain of salt.
Yes.
but he talked about parting ways with Indeed,
Indeed, yeah.
and he did it
he was
in a
gonna get on a
dramatic
flight,
fashion,
right?
Yeah.
and
Or no, he was on his way to a meeting.
I think he was at the airport
Yeah.
and was going to maybe go to a meeting for
Yeah.
Indeed Labs, and then
Decided
he
to
was
take a
like,
flight
"I'm not
somewhere
going
else
to," and then he
instead.
went somewhere else,
Yeah.
and that was that.
That's what he
and
did.
probably,
Yeah.
and that was
And nobody knew why.
yeah,
Yeah.
And that's where I say there's like anger, sadness, mad,
Right.
like
Yeah.
well, now what?
He just
Yeah.
did his own
I
thing.
had just raised funds through my connections
Yeah.
and we established a board and now
Yeah.
I had responsibility to this
Yeah.
funding. And that's a big, people
Yeah.
might say, well, I feel really bad. Like you were
Yeah.
stressed.
Yeah.
And that's not really the bigger part of the story. The bigger
Right.
part of the story is that you have a responsibility.
Yeah.
And this is someone else funding your business based on what you've told them
Right.
you
Yeah.
are going to deliver.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is why I took it so seriously.
Yeah.
Of
Yeah.
course.
Obviously.
Yes,
Yeah.
And
of
to this
course.
day. And so, I stayed. I was the one who stayed with
Yeah.
3 children.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was the one
Yeah.
who had a lot at risk. So
Yeah.
there
Yeah.
are times where, yes, I was very angry about, well, why I'm the one who should have left.
Yeah.
I didn't have the luxury at the time. My
Right.
kids were little.
Right.
You're the one who wanted to do this. I should have gotten off on a plane to go take a vacation. Right. I'm exhausted.
Yeah,
Sorry,
yeah.
but that was the honest
Yeah.
truth that
Yeah.
I never told anybody.
And do
Because
we-
that's what mothers do.
Yeah.
We make ourselves feel guilty.
And do we know the reason that he?
I believe that probably what happened is when you raise funds from a very formal financial investor, there's formalities and you have to answer to them. And Brandon was not used to that.
That's right.
Right.
And now all of a sudden, you had to answer for what you were doing and why, and put business
Right.
plans in place. And that's my background. I was very comfortable
Right.
with that.
Right.
But Brandon wasn't, and he
Right.
wasn't going to answer to anybody. So for me, then, what does that mean? Was it an ego thing? Was it a lack of knowledge, experience, understanding, accountability? Like, what was it? I don't really know. There wasn't a conversation. So there wasn't a whole lot of, I think I'm going to walk. This is not right. There was a little bit of friction for maybe a day between not even myself, Brandon, our other partners, and then a note saying I'm out.
Right.
And that was the end of that. So
Yeah.
The bridge
Yeah.
was burned.
the bridge
Yeah.
was burned.
Wow.
And
So you-
all the better for it
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
end, but definitely a lot of hiccup along the way. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
like keeping quiet was a hard thing to do. But again, my kids were little.
Yeah.
I had a job to do.
That's right.
I didn't just, plot, but I had had a
Yeah.
career prior to that. I knew responsibility. I knew what it meant
Yeah.
to have, you know, your reputation, to honor somebody else's and whatever. Anyway, that's what
Yeah, I mean, if you were going to continue with this brand, then you had to keep it clean and above
Yes.
board and
Yeah.
not burn, throw a
Absolutely.
bomb behind you.
No.
You've got to, you've got to start on the right foot, a
Yeah.
positive note. So good for you for doing that.
I really,
Thank you.
honestly, really appreciate you guys being here today, because I've known for the past, I don't know how many years, 8 years, that if I was going to talk to anybody, it's going to be you guys.
Aw, so
I didn't
nice.
even give this much to the interview that I
Well,
had.
we appreciate
Yeah,
it. We
that's
really appreciate your
amazing.
time. I feel like
Yeah.
the stars have aligned and the timing was
Yeah.
right to sit down
Yeah, I
and have a
agree.
gab session and just keep it real. And we
Yeah.
really
No.
appreciate it.